All right, big hand for Sam. He just performed a miracle. I thank you all for your patience. We should be able to keep the schedule on time. Thomas Hancock went to Muscomb University, probably pronouncing that wrong, with a double major in business marketing and digital media design. Common background for folks here at OLF, right? Well, Thomas began using Linux when he was 12, so I suspect he can get as nerdy as the rest of us. Today, he's going to be talking about Linux and how it can help artists be effective at their skills and building art. Big hand for Thomas.
All right. Hello, everyone. I gotta say, first and foremost, thank you so much for getting this all set up. I guess buying a crappy Chinese converter off of eBay doesn't really always work the best. Today, I'm going to be doing a presentation on using Linux as an artist and reasons why you should. And I'm going to be doing this entire presentation off of a 2009 EPC. As you can see, we have a first-gen Intel Atom with only 2 gigabytes of RAM and, yeah, a 32-bit processor. So that's what we're working with here. So let's get started out. How do I get to? Okay, so as I just said before, my name is Thomas Hancock, and these are the outstanding advantages of being a Linux-based artist. So, who am I? As said before the introduction, I am a graduate from Muscomb University. I double majored in business marketing and digital media design. I also work at a company known as Associated Graphics. We do wraps for cars and also fire trucks. And finally, I run my own independent record label known as Tom's Coffee Records, or TCR. I usually like to say TCR because I feel a little bit egotistical when I say Tom's Coffee Records. But I digress. I also am a part of CSCA, which is a collective of graphic designers in Columbus. And I recently got a grant from the Greater Columbus Arts Council. But, above all, I am a Linux user. Now, you might be wondering, how the heck does an artist become a Linux user? That's just such an odd combination. Well, I kind of had an odd start. Back in the day, when I used to browse the web and all that, I grew up on the internet. It's such a great place out there. Great with quotes. So every time I went to a download site, I go through freeware downloads all the time, trying to customize everything. And I always saw little tux icons popping up on all the software. I was wondering, what the heck is that thing? And I also had a little bit of a lack of understanding on how to, quote unquote, share software online, if you know what I mean. And the free label that I saw on a lot of Linux distributions really caught my eye, and it sounded really cool. And around the time 2011 or 2012, it was known to speed up your computer. And I also should make another point. Around 2011 or 2012, I also got my very first CD of Ubuntu 11.04 from this very conference. Now, this was my very first desktop. It is using Unity. I know there's some people rolling their eyes right now. And this is my desktop now. Now, it looks like a downgrade, but I'm going to get to that in a second. This is my current setup right now. Over there, we have a Wacom tablet and an Apple Cinema display. They're both connected in a very, 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 very janky setup. Right here, we have a VAIO PC. Under it, there is a Dremel hole where the PCIe port is, so I could connect a eGPU to it, which right there, I think that's an RX 580. But nevertheless, please don't do this. This is a fire hazard. Just please, please, for the love of God, do not do what I am doing right there. With that said, nevertheless, how did Linux get into the world of my designs? Well, first and foremost, it really optimized my workflow for rendering and processing stuff such as 3D models. It allowed me to lower the cost of utilities used to produce and make art. And it also extended the life of useful yet older components, e.g. this EPC right here. But I'd like to condense this down. So I'm going to cover it in several objectives. We have techniques, compatibility, programs, projects examples, and how you can get started yourself. Now, let's begin with techniques. So again, I should preface this. These are all how I went about it. There is many different ways you can slice an apple. You know, you probably can find a way that might work better for you than I found for myself. But this is how I found things, at least in my own way. An operating system sometimes can actually make a difference. And if you are aware of some package managers, sometimes things break a little bit more easily in some, and some don't really break that easily in others. And so with that comes a little bit of a complex level of just like manually doing things and yada yada. But it is important, from what I have understand, to choose something where the least amount of choice is hindered. So in our words, more options would equal a more tailored operating environment for your own digital design work. Another note is you should probably choose a window manager over a desktop environment. And I'll get to that in a second. If you aren't really that familiar with Linux, I would suggest using a desktop environment to just get yourself acclimated. I wouldn't really suggest going straight into something like IceWM or Window Maker just straight up. But you know, if you are new to Linux, choose something lightweight. So what are some recommendations? If you're just starting out, I would suggest something like XFCE, Unity, maybe, or LXQT. If you're getting a little bit more into the weeds of things, I actually still use some of these, even though they're not as complex. I would suggest something like IceWM, Trinity Desktop Environment, or Window Maker. IceWM is probably my favorite, though. But most difficult, in my opinion, but I will say this, it probably offers the most performance. Something such as Ion 3, Waimea, JWM, or FVWM. There's a lot of stuff you can customize. However, it's very, very manual work to really set it all up. But also with that comes operating systems. Now in the past, I would have recommended Ubuntu, but at this point in time, at least when I've tried it out and installed it on some PCs, it seems to have a performance that's similar or comparable to Windows 10 or Windows 11 right now when it's not debloated at all. So I really don't feel comfortable recommending that. However, if you are just starting out, I would say something such as MX Linux, Debian, or Linux Mint would be a great place to start. Getting a little bit, again, more into the weeds, Void Linux, which actually I'm using right now, or Dev1 would be a good place to move from there. And then finally, if you really want to get more difficult and really manual, actually, I should preface this, Artix can be a little bit in the medium category when you're installing, but it's not as stable when you're doing, even if you're going to go through a graphical install, it's better to have a LTS kernel under Artix, but Artix or Parabola would probably be the more difficult. However, if you are using Gentoo, you probably already know everything I am going to say and everything I will ever say, so you probably don't even need this even need this presentation in the first place. Now, let's get into compatibility. So, one of the first things I wanted to talk about is device support under compatibility. Printers, drawing tablets and displays, and GPUs, besides NVIDIA sometimes, and architecture are all different things that seem to be very easy to set up under Linux. So, starting off, let's talk about plug-and-play devices. Some display converters may not work immediately under Linux. For example, I had a StarTech a StarTech adapter that converted DisplayPort to DVI. And it was some odd sort of DVI standard, but it worked immediately under Linux. However, when I booted it up under Windows, excuse me, it would not even show us something on the screen. Stuff like that usually is automatically detected upon boot. And things such as drawing tablets can also be automatically detected by the kernel, unless your kernel is custom, e.g. Gen 2 users. Now, moving on from there, let's talk printers. So this is probably one of my favorite parts about Linux, and it's one of the easiest things to set up. So it's like, it's really great, but there is a thing when you install Linux known as CUPS, also known as Common Unix Printing Service or System. I can't remember whether the last two words, which one it is, but it will not always be installed by default. However, it will automatically recognize a printer once a brand-related driver is installed. But what's cool about that is when you install a brand-related driver, as an example, HP Lip or CNIJ filter, unlike a Windows driver where you will probably have to set up like 200 megabyte files that have like probably 1 or 2 printer drivers in it, this will install the entire line of that exact printing manufacturer. And finally, this is my favorite part of all the favorite parts I just mentioned, is support for legacy devices. So this actually means I can use a printer like this from 1998. And you might be wondering, that's completely obsolete. Why would you ever use something like that? And the reason for that is actually because of DRM. Most of the printers these days have their chips, so you cannot install ink yourself, or you have to apply to a subscription service. And I can get into a rabbit hole on that. But with that said, printers as old as this one right here will automatically be recognized by Linux, and they won't be recognized by Windows or Mac. And you can like easily refill the cartridges of these and never have to actually worry about having to replace them, unless like the printer cartridge head fails. But at that point, it's like only like $12 for a replacement. You can just get an empty cartridge. But that's what's really cool. Like, these printers can get a second life, and it also allows you to create less e-waste in the process. But moving on from there, let's talk video drivers. Video drivers from even 20 years ago are still supported under programs such as, what is it called? Mesa Amber. And so as an example, I think I was talking about this to someone else in the hall, but devices this old will, like, let's just take the Trident Cyberblade, will be detected by default when you boot up. And it's really nice and comfortable when those devices are still supported. So you can use like a laptop from like 2001 or even older, definitely older than this. It was only recently actually that Linux was even considering dropping support for i4086, but I mean, I don't know where it went from there, but from what I know, devices even as old as i586 are still supported. And with that, you can also get the most up-to-date software. So with that, talking about software, let's actually move into programs. So first and foremost, I want to talk about the program Blender. So Blender is probably one of the most popular 3D modeling programs that we have today. Like, movies that are made today are using this program. If you go to an art school, one of my friends even said it's like an industry standard at places like Savannah College of Art and Design to use Blender. It has modular plugins, so you can download stuff from their store, or you can add things in, and there's different types of open source rendering options, such as Radeon Pro Render or Cycles that you can add into it to model with it. And this is the really, really cool part. It can compile for your specific system. So even some 32-bit hardware, such as this computer right here, can support it. And I say in some cases because it has, even though it might support your processor, it might not support your graphics card. So my integrated graphics probably wouldn't work with this, and I'd probably have to get an eGPU that would create another fire hazard. To move on from there, we also have the program Libre Sprite. Now, Libre Sprite is actually based off of Sprite, and it offers animation support and is a really great pixel art program. I'm actually doing a recent project I'll talk about later with this program. So it also tries to implement newer features while keeping open source. So it's a really great project to see after Sprite decided to close their doors. Then we have color calibration. And this is something I also find really cool. So there is the program XICCD and ColorD. And these two programs in tandem will allow you to set a specific color profile on your monitor. So as an industry standard, most of the time it's important to use Adobe RGB 1998 because it was heavily studied to make sure the colors were as accurate as possible to whatever you print out. So with that said, you can actually set up different color profiles on different monitors as well. So it doesn't have to be the same one on each monitor. You can also, it's just really cool. And it also starts up directly with Xorg. So with that, I'd like to also do a couple demos. I was going to do these with my graphics tablet, and I tried to remember it. I brought the pen. I brought the actual cable, but I did not bring the actual tablet itself. Now, I'm going to try to do this MS Paint style like a third grader on this thing right here. So let's go into some of the programs. I'm going to start with a program made by a good friend of mine known as C-Sprite. This was, I gotta say first and foremost, the developer of this is amazing. He has really great communications with everyone who submits an issue to him. I remember I had a little issue where it had an out of bounds, where I would draw and it would crash with out of bounds. I submitted that to him within a couple hours. He fixed it. He is a phenomenal developer, I will say that right now. In this program, you might be wondering why it's called C-Sprite. It is developed completely under C. Now, what's cool about this is it allows you to input custom palettes. So if we go up here, let's see, palette. We have some palettes that people submitted right here. This is CC29. Let's try to draw a little. Actually, I'm going to go up a little bit on the brush size. A little happy worm. If we go around here, I just need to scroll upward and it will increase the brush size. If I want to zoom out, I can hold down Control and it will zoom out. And I can just add a little smile right here. Oop, we'll get into that in a sec. And I can draw a little, let's make sure his smiley face is all the way visible. Really happy guy right there. He's really glad to be here. And yeah, so you can set that all up. I actually, on one of my projects, I used it to make a t-shirt, and it just worked fantastic. So if you have time, I would definitely check out the project. It's by a developer known as Pegvin. So yeah, definitely check it out. It's a really great program, and it compiles really quickly. But now let's move into probably one of my favorite programs. I've done so much on this over time. And it's kind of funny how I found out about it. I was just reading a thread, and it was just like a bait thread online. And it was for I think it was for GIMP or whatever, and people were like, oh, Krita's better. And I was like, I don't even know what Krita is. I looked it up, and I tried it out, and I just love it. But we're going to try a sample, and a little preface, I love to work on projects and art pieces based off of internet history or internet figures of some sort. This is a character known as Magichan. Now, if we open it up, I heard that from back. I think some people know who This is referring, perhaps. Now, if we go into the color selector right here, what's really great about this program is it works under here. I think this compiled within a day. It took a little long. But if we color right here, you can see it's similar to what you would see in Illustrator or something you would see under Photoshop. Because actually, I should mention this too. It imports Photoshop files such as PSD files into it too. So it's really great in that regard. But unlike Photoshop or GIMP, it's designed particularly around artists. So even if I go under settings, there's color profiles I can set for this specific application. And let's just do a little thing here. Let's just say I put this little blob here. If I want to color within that specific blob, I can click this little lock right here. And let's make an awful graphic design as my passion color that is inside that other color. And you can see it goes within that actual blob right there. Now, what it also does, if I was to show my graphics tablet right now, is it also has pressure sensitivity right out of the box. Under Windows, I've tried this. It's really annoying because under Windows, if you hold down too long, it will pop up like a little question mark and ask you a bunch of little questions and get you out of the immersion of creating your art. So it's a fantastic utility to just get into. If you have something more advanced like that Wacom I showed earlier, excuse me, it will basically allow you to turn around the pencil and erase with the other side. Now, let's actually move into some of the projects I have done in the past. So these are done mostly using programs that I have shown you here today. My first one is a shirt I made known as Pixel Bros. This was made under C-Spray and admittedly Illustrator. I'm still trying to learn Inkscape, but I really haven't gotten around to it. I need to make an effort for that, but once I start learning that, it should make it a little bit easier. But this was created by making sprites under a gray and black, a grayscale color palette, and then printing it onto recycled thermal paper from receipts. And then from there, we placed it in a rectangular shape and printed it onto a t-shirt, as you can see here. It was a really cool project. But moving on from there, it was also completely manually sublimated using sublimation printers. The next project was a dedication I made to the artist Kazuki Takahashi. He was one of the artists who worked, one of the main people involved in making Yu-Gi-Oh! Back in the day. Now, this was completely made under both just me manually drawing, scanning it in, and then I did everything else, the shading, the coloring under Krita. So this is the first result. You can see in black and white. That was the initial scan, and at the end, that is what I got by the end of it. Now, these are some projects I am still working and are in production. First and foremost, these are some album covers I've been working on. This is the first one. This is for an artist known as Pingapong64. This is done using Krita, and I did a bunch of different filters and all that, but it's supposed to be industrial power plant. And the second one is known as Cloud Replica. I try to use a grayscale and black and white color palette with my album artwork to try to keep a consistency under. So when you line up the albums, they all kind of look consistent, so I try to keep everything black and white. But this is the album artwork for soon-to-be-produced Cloud Replica. I was supposed to have it done yesterday, but still need to get some stuff underway. I had some issues with the printer. But yeah, I did that under Krita as well. And then we have, this is one that I'm really excited for because it's almost completely done under open source software. This is a reimagining of scientific illustrations. And what I'm doing with this, it is basically a t-shirt that will be made from scientific illustrations from like the 1800s and early 1800s and early 1900s, where we have some fish, and some of them look obscure, or they have an odd sort of illustrator who created them under the scientific illustrations. And what I wanted to do was recreate it, and then try to 3D model it, and then create a pixelated skin that would go over the 3D model. And then that will be rigged onto it and then put onto a t-shirt. I might also make a video too, like as like an introduction when it's created, but this one I'm really excited for. And with that all said, how can you get started? I would say, first and foremost, find a slower computer you tend to use less. Reinstall your OS, whether it's Windows or Mac OS X, but instead of installing it over the complete hard drive, partition it so you have one half for your system and one half for your Linux system. Start with something like Debian or Linux Mint and install that on the other partition. And until you start feeling comfortable with things, just keep on switching back and forth. Try to use Linux more, but with the programs you feel like you're most comfortable with, and when you feel more comfortable with other things, just keep on testing the waters until you feel comfortable. And when you feel a little too comfortable and used to things, it might be good to switch it up. Try something a little harder to challenge yourself, and then go on from there. And that's what I would suggest. It's really great to constantly learn. That's one thing I've learned as an artist over time. And with that all said, thank you for listening. If you guys want to reach me, my QR code's right there. The website is right there. And I am completely open for questions.
Do you have any audio to share or show us?
Audio? Oh, I don't make music. I wish I could. That's the thing. That's actually why I created a record label, because I can't make music myself, and I love music to death. So I want to try to help out artists as much as I can who are musicians. Anything else?
Is that you modeling in that picture with the shirt?
Yeah, that's me. I try to be resourceful with my lack of materials, so it's me and a close friend of mine. Yeah.
Do you have suggestions for physical setup on the drawing tablet? For instance, I believe yours was set up that it looks like a actual monitor setup.
Yeah.
It is vertical, so your hand will drop instead of a lot of the tablets out of the box. They're set up to kind of be on your desk, so you're going forward and back, which isn't intuitive if you've learned to paint.
So if I'm getting what you're saying is how you position a tablet parallel to the screen so it feels more intuitive. Okay. Well, there is, I would say first and foremost, I found it most useful for me to use like a Cintiq, since it's the screen and that, but I can understand spending a little bit less. If you were to do that, if you have it tilted on the side, like kind of just like at an angle right next to the monitor, it kind of helps your hand kind of feel like used to the strokes and all that. But yeah, hopefully that helps. I can definitely talk afterwards about other things. Oh. There.
How would you teach yourself Blender?
Oh, so that friend I actually showed earlier who was modeling for the t-shirts, she was one of the people who went to Savannah, and she has like this ethereal knowledge when it comes to Blender. So she taught me, sent me a couple tutorials one day. I was going on a long car ride, and I decided to go through it, and I started to get more and more of a better understanding of how to use it. And then from there, I also just picked up some things along the way, you know? That's the great thing about YouTube and all that. It just has so many different ways you can learn a different program. But yeah.
5 new keyboard shortcuts for every
those shortcuts. Oh, one thing with that, I don't know where they make them, but there are some like overlays people will get where they put them over the actual keyboard and it shows you exactly what keys go to what specific shortcut. It's really cool. I'm too cheap for that though. Well, thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate this. This is a great opportunity.
I don't see Warner in here, but we will be taking a brief break between now and the next session.